So all of my grandparents started out in Sicily, and they come from small villages, very small, remote, in the mountains. My grandfather, on my father's side, worked in a sulfur mine. And then sometime around 1920, in that time period, my father's parents decided to immigrate to the U.S. So they came, they got on a boat in Naples. They went to New York, immigrated through Ellis Island. They moved to Chicago because they knew people in Chicago. There's an Italian neighborhood there in Chicago that they settled in, and that's where I was born. I was born in Chicago in 1950 is when I was born. So my parents never finished high school, so they never had a high school education. They knew the importance of education. They pushed me in a direction that would lead to going on to school. I have two younger brothers, and my younger brothers also, of course, finished high school. I was the first to go to college, and my other brothers, they started, I think, a year or two, and they decided it wasn't for them. So they dropped out, and they went into a profession. So my closest brother in age, he went to become an electrician. And my mother understands what an electrician is. My mother's 97, so she's still around, very sharp. She has trouble getting around. She's in a wheelchair, so she's not quite as spry as she used to be, but she is sharp. And all through my education, my mother really doesn't know what I do. Right, so she doesn't have any really understanding about universities, about being a professor, about research, and she knows very well what my brothers do. They're both electricians. In fact, they owned a company themselves to do this, and she often wonders if I'm doing okay. She's always a little bit concerned about my existence, and can I make it? Are we doing okay? It's that kind of thing. So, as an example, so I have my wife and I have 3 children, and as they're growing up, my wife would during birthdays, my wife would make a cake. So she would ask the kids, what kind of cake do you want? And they would say dinosaur cake or dragons or something, and so she would make the cake, and my mother is not of a period where making the cake was the right thing to do. They would rather go out and buy the cake. So that was a mark of, you're doing okay. You can buy the cake. You don't have to make it yourself. So again, it reinforces that idea. Maybe we're not doing so well because we have to make the cake for our kids. When I was going to school, I was not doing very well in school. I had a hard time reading, had a hard time spelling, had a hard time writing. I was doing okay in math. Math and science I would do fine. I would maybe even excel in those topics, but reading, writing, spelling, it was really a terrible, frustrating way of doing business. And I went to high school, and again I struggled with it there. I probably just made the grade, if you will. So I probably had average grade or less than average grade, but I was able to progress. And only later did it become more apparent that I had a problem with dyslexia. And today, I still have that problem. This is something that doesn't go away, but I have mechanisms to cope with that. I love technology, so technology is something I find fascinating, and I want to understand how things work. So taking things apart and understanding how things are functioning at some level. So an example of that is my father had just bought a new electric drill, so for his shop, for his tools, and I didn't understand how it worked, so I wanted to take it apart and get it to look inside and see what was the mechanism that was driving this drill. So I did take it apart, but I couldn't quite put it back together again. So I had a situation where I destroyed this brand new drill because of my curiosity. And my father was very understanding. He said, "Don't worry about it. We'll go out and buy another one." And he just said, "Try not to take that one apart." So I had one that I had already disassembled, and I was happy enough with that. But yeah, technology is wonderful. I always enjoy, and I'm fascinated by certain aspects of technology. I felt I was good at science, so I wanted to. I felt I could become a high school science teacher. That was a goal. And I enrolled, after graduating from grammar school, I enrolled in a college that was basically the college that educated teachers in Chicago. When I started, I have to say, it wasn't clear I could do this. It wasn't clear I could graduate. But sometime during the 4 years, it sort of, a bell went off and says, "Oh, I can do this. I can finish. I can go through school, become a teacher, and help go out and have a profession." It's an honorable profession, being a high school teacher, right? But I had this, all through my career, I've had great mentors, great people who pushed things in the right direction. So at Chicago State University, where I was taking courses, and again, I was doing pretty well in math and science, my physics teacher suggested that I apply for a position at a national laboratory. And the position was to spend a semester with a scientist. So the idea was if you get selected, they selected like 50 people from around the country. And if you get selected, then you would spend one semester working with a scientist on a particular problem, and then presumably you go back to your school and continue with your education. So it was a way to do sort of an internship at the National Laboratory. And that was transformational, being exposed to a scientific environment, seeing people and how they worked, and understanding a little bit better about computing and what was done there. It was something that really lit a spark and said, "This is what I want to do." So as I was there, I finished my semester, graduated, and I decided that maybe I shouldn't be a high school teacher. But from the experience, I felt that computing was something I really wanted to do and learn about. So I applied really late in the cycle of applying for things. I applied for a master's degree at a school in Chicago, Illinois Institute of Technology, in computer science. So I was going to go for a master's degree at IIT. I was living at home at that point. So I had the opportunity then to work with people students from many places, the top schools, and interact with them at some level. So it was a great experience. Well, computing was a new thing. It was something which was just verging. It was coming onto the scene. It was becoming something that more people were aware of. I did my first program when I was in college. They had a computer from a company called Wang, and I remember punching a card. There was one card which had the program. It was pretty tedious to do. I was able to make it correct after a while and get an answer. I forgot even what I was doing. So that was my very first program. There was also an interactive terminal that did time sharing at the university. And I remember taking a calculus course, and I remember a problem that was given for homework. It was a tedious problem in complex arithmetic, doing some matrix thing, which was going to take hours and hours to grind out. And I knew there would be mistakes all over the place. And I said, I think I'm going to use the computer to do it. So I was able to input the matrix and to solve the problem very simply on the computer. And then I was worried whether or not the professor was going to accept that assignment, but he understood that this was a good thing, so he accepted it. And it was my first very positive experience with a computer. I was working at this national laboratory. I was getting a master's degree while I was still working there. So I was taking classes in Chicago, living at home, and working 1 day a week at the National Laboratory. That was the model. And after I finished my master's degree, I wasn't sure I wanted to go for a PhD. So the people at the National Lab offered a job to me, a permanent job, so a full-time job. So I decided to take that full-time job. So I worked at the National Lab, next to the scientists who were there, who had PhDs, and interacted, contributed, did all the things that we normally do. And they encouraged me, that is, the people who were at the lab encouraged me to go back to school. They said, we'll help you, we'll make it easy, we'll give you opportunities and even pay for part of your education going back to school. And we had many visitors come to the National Lab, many visitors from universities. And they also said the same thing, that they would like to encourage me to go back to school. So again, I've had terrific mentors all along the way. One of them said, come to my university. We'll make it easy for you to get a degree, and you can work with me when I was there. So I did that. His name is Cleve Moeller. He was at the University of New Mexico. So I, with the encouragement of the people at the laboratory where I was working, Argonne National Laboratory, they allowed me to go away and work on my PhD. So the University of New Mexico is located in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Albuquerque is where there's another national laboratory, Los Alamos National Laboratory. So it's very similar in many ways to the place I was working at. And again, the people at Argonne said that, made the connections with the people at Los Alamos so that I could work there 1 day a week as well. So I was going to school, taking classes in Albuquerque, and then going up to Los Alamos 1 day a week and interacting with the people there and trying to learn more about computing. At Los Alamos, they had the fastest computer. It's a Cray, one of the first Cray computers was there. And it was an exciting time. Here was the fastest computer. I was a graduate student, and I was getting time on that computer to write software and to understand how that computer worked. It was new for everybody. We were just experimenting with it. I had some software that we had developed, and I wanted to run it on that computer. And so there was a test that was there of this software that we have, and the test, as all good software should be, you solve a problem and then you check to see you have the right answer. So that's part of the process of developing software, is coming up with adequate testing so that you not only have something that's going to run fast, but you're going to have something that runs correctly on the computer. So, I had the software, we were running it on other computers, and now it was time to run it on this very fast computer. So, I did that. This machine was brand new at that time. It was just starting up. And I ran my software on that computer, and I realized I was getting the wrong answer. And I was struck by that because there's a built-in test that's in there which should tell me that it's got the correct answer, and it was telling me I had the wrong answer. And I thought, at first, of course, there was a problem with my program. So there's always problems with programs. That's part of the nature of writing a program, is you have to debug it and go through a process of verifying that it's correct. So that was the next step that I did. And so typically what happens is you find the bug. You find the mistake that you made logically in your program, and you correct it, and everything is fine. I didn't find the bug. I knew that the program had worked correctly on another computer, so I thought maybe it was related to the compiler. So this was a Fortran program. A Fortran program gets compiled into the specific machine language, and that machine language gets run on the computer. So maybe there was a problem with that translation. So you can take a look at what was produced during the translation and see what was generated. And I looked at that code that came out of that, and I said, the code looks correct. So, again, I'm running problems, and I always think in computing, you always think it's your problem. You can't, I try to look first anyway, that it's my problem. But this was a new computer. So, I finally got up enough courage to talk to the engineers who were making that computer work And I said, I'm getting the wrong answer for this. And I've checked my results, I checked my program, I knew exactly what the answer should be. I checked the compiler generated output. I think maybe there could be a problem with the computer. And they looked at me carefully. I was a young guy. They looked at me carefully and they says, okay, let's check this out. So they did more tests, and we were able to narrow it down to a specific thing. And sure enough, there was a mistake in the hardware that was generating the wrong results if a certain input was given. So I just happened to hit on a certain input that generated something which gave the wrong results, and that was a bug that was in the hardware. That was the first time that I found that. And after 1 year period, there's some kind of residency requirement that they have at New Mexico. After 1 year, I passed all my exams that you have to for this PhD. I'd taken all the courses, and the only thing remaining was completing my dissertation. And I could do that back at my laboratory in Chicago at Argonne National Lab. So I moved back there and completed my work at Argonne National Laboratory. My area of, I'll call it expertise, is in numerical linear algebra. So numerical linear algebra deals with matrices and deals with computations that are required to compute solutions to those matrices. So it's a mathematical problem, and it's a problem which can use computing to solve it. When I was working on the project in New Mexico, the LINPACK project, I just thought it'd be fun to have a license plate that said LINPACK. So I went off and secured that license plate. And I've done that for a number of our software projects. I think it builds some morale. It's a fun thing to look at. It's a souvenir at the end of the project. It's a fun thing. And my current license plate says ICL, and that's for the Innovative Computing Lab. That's my group. So, again, I've got something which represents what we do. I would say, we're fortunate in the area that I work in, along with my colleagues. We're fortunate that we do enjoy what we do. We have fun. It's like going into the office at some level is, it's like it's Christmas every day, opening things and trying new things and experimenting with things. It's exciting. It's frustrating at times, but it is exciting. Research is a very creative idea, and generating new ideas is always good. I love interacting with people, so I have a lot of colleagues, and we get together and think about new ways of doing things. We write a proposal, and it's a lot of things get thrown against the wall, and we try to understand what sticks, and we go forward with those ideas and write something up. So it's a great thing. That collaborative orientation is just really, really wonderful. You go to a conference and you want to network, you want to talk to people, you want to explain what you've done, and you want to hear about what they've done. And there's casual conversations that take place which are really generating new ideas. It's just serendipitous interactions that take place. And even in the office, we have a coffee machine, and just the casual conversations that occur around the coffee machine become indispensable in terms of generating new ideas. And now if I try to project what's going to happen in the next 30 years, I have a hard time grabbing what that will be, because the changes will be so great and it'll be nothing like I've ever seen before. I don't think anybody could fully absorb what was about to happen and what is happening. I mean, this is incredible changes that are taking place over short periods of time. The advances that are made in computing. The fact that I have a computer that I can use on an airplane, spend 12 hours on a battery, and have the computing power that they had 30 years ago is just incredible in some sense. That's an amazing situation. I had one of the most sophisticated devices that were in existence just 30 years ago, which I throw underneath the seat of an aircraft, and I use casually, mainly to read email. It's just stunning to me. There's been a number of changes over the years. There's been changes in the speed of our computations. There's been increases in the amount of data that we process. There's been this incredible revolution that's taking place with machine learning. Things being driven by artificial intelligence. That's a terrific tool that we will be using for a long time. That's something which scientists will have in their tool belt, using machine learning techniques to help understand and to drive forward things in science much faster than we could have without using those tools. So, having artificial intelligence implemented embedded in the application to drive those applications forward is going to be something that's going to be very useful for science in general. So this is a revolution that's taking place. The revolution came about because of a number of things, because of big data, being able to train things. We need a lot of data for the training process. Having algorithms or methods that have been improved over the years for deep neural networks. Having processors that can process things very rapidly. The GPUs are terrific at that. So, sort of a combination of those things that made it feasible to do machine learning at the way in which we're doing it today, and that required that combination of a lot of data, the right kind of hardware, and new algorithms being created, and that's what's driving a lot of what we have today in deep learning. So, and that'll continue, absolutely. I'm convinced that it will, and it'll become more important as we go forward. So think of a supercomputer as a sophisticated instrument. Think of it at some level like the Webb telescope. So here's a tremendous apparatus for expanding our knowledge. Supercomputers are like, think of it like being able to tell the future. So they can predict the future, right? So how do they predict the future? Well, there's a mathematical model, they have a starting condition, and because of the starting condition, they run the model forward, and you can predict what might happen in the future. That's how we do weather forecasts, for instance, and that's how we study climate and try to understand better what happens in the future. So, it's a crystal ball that we use to solve many kinds of problems. On that same token, we can use computers to design things which are quite negative as well. So negative in the sense that we can design nuclear bombs with them. So, they're being used to simulate what happens during a reaction of that kind. On the same token, those reactions are very similar to what happens in a nuclear reactor, and we want to use that to produce electricity, so that's a very safe way. So the difference between those two things is not that great in terms of the computational equations that are being used to solve those things. So we have a device which can be used for many purposes. We all hope that they're going to be used for good purposes, but they can be used for other purposes as well. So I worked at Argonne National Lab for many years. I was an undergraduate when I started working there. I went there to get my master's degree and get my PhD, and I continued working there for a number of years. And then, again, through casual encounters with people, somebody from Tennessee said they have this very unique position at the University of Tennessee. It was joint position between Oak Ridge National Laboratory and the University of Tennessee. So, I had original desire to be a teacher, and this was an opportunity to see if I was any good at being a teacher at a university, a professor at a university. So I took the opportunity and moved my family from Chicago area to the mountains of Tennessee, and became a professor at the University of Tennessee and a scientist at Oak Ridge National Laboratory. So having students to mentor is a good thing. It makes you young, I think, in some sense, being able to interact and to train them and to work with them. And they're also smart. They're also clever. So giving them a problem to work on is something that I do all the time. And they go off and work on it and hopefully come up with a solution. But they're young. So usually when I give a student a problem, they go off and work on it, research problem. They go off and work on it and come back after a few days, and they say, I don't know how to solve this. And I say, that's perfect. That's exactly what you should be saying. It's a research problem. If it was an easy problem, somebody else would have solved it. You're getting a problem to look at and to work with and to understand and to figure out, come up with some new and creative way of solving this problem. That's part of the research. I say, go away and work on it and come back and tell me the solution in a few weeks or months or something. So, and they do, and they understand what's going on. Hopefully I haven't given them too hard a problem so that they can, in fact, solve it or at least make some headway into solving it. I always tell when young people come and say, how do I do what you do? What advice can you give? I always say, you have to follow your passion. You have to do things that you enjoy doing and express yourself through that passion somehow. And take on new things. Aim high. Go for things that you don't know how to solve, but apply yourself in terms of solving those problems. And the other thing I tell them is expect to fail. This is part of the process. You're not going to hit a home run every time. You're going to fail. It's going to be time consuming. You're going to be going down paths which lead nowhere, but that's part of the process. And accept that and learn from those mistakes and try to improve on what you're doing because of those mistakes that you've made or errors, and use it as knowledge for the future. I don't like to miss opportunities. So if I see an opportunity, I think we should go for it. So in our existence, so my group has 45 people, and those 45 people are made up of, again, myself, research professors, graduate students, postdocs, and administrative staff. Those people, only one of them has a job for life, and that's me. Everybody else is on what we call soft money. So we have to generate proposals that get funded, and that funding then does pay for their salary. If we don't have proposals, if we don't have accepted proposals, if we don't get the research funding, they don't have a job. I'm the only one with a job for life. So there's certainly a lot of motivation for everybody to contribute and to help with that process. So we're all involved. Everybody understands the story. There's no confusion about how things work, and everybody is in a position to contribute to making that story whole. Whenever approaching research, you try to come up with a problem that's hard, that hasn't been solved before, and you want to come up with a solution that's unique, that's correct, gives the right answer, that's done faster than you could have done it some other way, that has some new theory perhaps associated with it, and that potentially has an impact in a broader way. So those are all goals. Sometimes we make those goals, sometimes we don't, but that's part of the process of being creative, I guess, is coming up with ways that go forward, that improve on what other people have done, that make things better in general. So, we have certain talents that we possess that are easily applied. Those are tools that we've acquired over time, and now we're going to apply those tools to our solution of this particular problem. Sometimes problems are beyond our ability to solve those problems, at least at the moment. So, as anything, we sleep on it. So we never have the easy, I would say it's very rare that we have a solution that comes to us immediately and we're able to come to find that solution. It's like anything, if you think hard enough about it, maybe you'll find a way to overcome and to solve it. There are some problems which we're just not clever enough to come up with ways, and somebody else will have to do that. But sometimes we think about the problem, we talk to our colleagues and say, we're working on this problem here. Do you have any ideas on how to solve it? And sometimes there's a match so that we can do collaborative work and interact and benefit in a mutual way. And I also have the opportunity to have students and postdocs come from other places and interact with us. They bring their culture. We get to understand something better. My group has many French colleagues, so we have a lot of French being spoken in the coffee room. And that's always a wonderful thing to see that kind of interaction taking place. Let's see, so I've been doing this for a long time, and if I had to point to something which was not my most favorite thing, it would be this constant pressure to come up with funding to support the group. So again, 45 people, being able to come up with the research funds on a consistent basis over a long period of time is never easy. Fortunately, we have very talented people, and I don't want to lose the talented people. If you lose somebody, it's hard to replace that individual. It's hard to find somebody with that same talent and that long exposure. So I don't want to, I really dread the fact that we would lose somebody. And it's getting, in some sense, things are more complicated today. because I work in an environment which is academic, and we have skills which are useful skills not only in the academic setting but also in the commercial setting. So we compete now with people over commercial companies that want to acquire that talent. And of course, they can pay a lot more than I can, or they could offer stock options, which I don't have the luxury of having at a university. So it's even more complicated now because people don't have to go someplace else to work. They can work from home. So a company can make an offer to somebody, make that offer 2 times the salary they're making now, and allow them to work at their home doing something very similar to what they were doing with me. And I find that to be a very frustrating situation when it happens. So we lose talent. I can't easily replace that talent, and they're being moved over to companies. Maybe that's my role. Maybe my role is to provide a mechanism to educate people and have them go off and find another job. We have a great environment for people to work in, so that's the other thing that we can offer. So if you look beyond just making money, we look at the quality of life, let's call it. We provide a quality of life. It's an easy environment to live in. The stresses are not as great as they might be, let's say, at a company. With a company, you could be working on this problem today, and tomorrow somebody says, we're going to forget about that problem, you've got to work on this problem now. And they give you something completely new in a different area. So, they've got to be able to adjust to that without too much problem. Where in the area I have, it's a long-term research relationship that we try to cultivate. And maybe there's some stability in that. You have to have an area where you feel you can make a contribution. You have to have an area where you have a passion for doing something. You really want to do this thing. You have a driving motivation to take this on. And you have to know enough about the area to understand where the problems, where interesting problems are, problems that you can work on and potentially make a contribution to solving. That's an important thing. You can't be working in isolation without any knowledge of what's going on around you. You have to understand what's happening now and where perhaps you can make that contribution to drive things forward. And again, that comes about by interacting with people to see what they're doing and trying to understand the problems that they're having and maybe helping them solve the problems that they have. We should compete with people, but we should also collaborate with them. The competition is good because it drives us in a certain direction, maybe makes us work a little bit harder than we would have otherwise, but also collaborating with people is a wonderful way of doing business as well. Well, computing is part of the fabric of our society, and it plays an important role in how things are done. Science is driven by simulation today, and that simulation is done through computing. So that really sets up things to show that it has an important place. Coming up with ideas which are making things better has an impact on the science, and we make contributions to society through that mechanism. So it's maybe a unique time to be involved in things. I think that computers are going to be around for much longer, of course, and they're going to carry on with that impact in terms of scientific discovery, and that's enough to motivate many people.